Now with the latest ITV news from Granada Reports with Lucy Meacock and Gamal Fambilay.
I have found a significant missed opportunity to take action that might have prevented the attack. The reasons for this missed opportunity included a failure by the security service, in my view, to act swiftly enough. What an appalling loss, which was so unnecessary.
Good evening. The strongest of criticism for MI5 tonight over missing a significant opportunity to stop Salman Abedi, the man who bombed the Manchester Arena, killing 22 people.
You join us at the memorial to those who died as we ask what went wrong. How did a teenager turn into a killer on such a massive scale?
The findings are stark. The inquiry points the finger at a number of failings on the part of MI5. Our correspondent Amy Welsh has covered this from the outset. So tonight, the important final chapter, Amy.
That's right, Lucy. The families were promised the truth, but what they have been given in this 200-plus page report is far from the full picture. Yes, MI5 missed a significant opportunity to take action. They failed to share information with counter-terrorism police, and they underestimated the significance of individuals travelling back and forth to Libya. Indeed, had Salman Abedi been stopped at the airport 4 days before he carried out this attack, there is a real possibility they might have found him to be carrying the switch he used to detonate that device. It is a chilling thought, and yet despite all of that, the chairman is unable to say with any certainty whether the attack could have been prevented or whether further action would have made a difference. In his words, it might have done, but it might not have done. But for all the families who lost loved ones, even the faintest possibility that he could have been stopped is a failure for which they have paid the ultimate price.
Yeah, and Amy, Sir John also apologised to the family that so much of this report was done in secret. He said that he did his best. How are they tonight?
They're angry, Gamal. They're angry and they're frustrated because although MI5 accept that mistakes were made, concerns over national security mean the details of those failings will remain secret. Sir John Saunders acknowledges this report will raise further questions, and for that he says he is sorry, and it'll only be the Home Secretary, MI5 and counter-terrorism police that are given access to a further closed report which will give details of those failings, and that means yet again the families must put their faith in organisations to acknowledge their mistakes behind closed doors.
Yeah, further questions as you say. OK, Amy, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Gamal. Well, in a break with their usual code of silence, the Director General of MI5, Ken McCallum's, issued an apology this evening. Appearing alongside the head of counter-terrorism policing, he described his deep regret that intelligence was not obtained and acted upon.
Gathering covert intelligence is difficult, but had we managed to seize the slim chance we had, those impacted might not have experienced such appalling loss and trauma. I am profoundly sorry that MI5 did not prevent the attack. The people of MI5 and our policing partners come to work every day to stop terrorism. We continually work to improve the counter-terrorism system. Since the terrible events of 2017, we have made more than 100 improvements, but we are determined to do more. As the Chair now considers his recommendations, we will engage fully. Where there are opportunities to strengthen the UK's defences further, MI5 will act. We will continue to do everything in our power to keep our country safe from hidden threats. MI5 exists to stop atrocities. To all those whose lives were forever changed on that awful night, I am so sorry that MI5 did not prevent the attack at the Manchester Arena.
I want those who have lost loved ones to know that their loss has steeled us to make our counter-terrorism partnerships stronger, faster and more effective. And I pledge that alongside MI5, we'll act quickly to apply the findings of today's reports and that we remain relentless and restless in our work to keep the public safe.
Yeah, quite the apology. Well, our correspondent Andy Bonner has been hearing from the families of the victims reacting to today's findings.
It was the deadliest terrorist attack in the UK in 12 years. Now its victims' families and survivors know missed opportunities might have prevented the Manchester Arena bombing.
It's just dreadful. I hope anybody off MI5 who's watching knows how heartbroken we all are.
For bereaved loved ones, the recognition that security services hadn't acted on key intelligence about bomber Salman Abedi is little consolation. Alison Howe was a 45-year-old mum of 2 and stepmum of 4 from Oldham.
There's grandkids coming through. Alison's not going to see any of them. There must be people in MI5 who are sat there cringing. They know they've got blood on their hands. And how they can actually stay in their own positions is beyond me.
We learnt quite a lot more today than we previously knew about the events leading up to this attack and the failings on the part of security services and counter-terrorism. And it was obviously welcome to hear that information, but at the same time frustrating because there's more that we want to know. And of course devastating to know that there was a significant opportunity that was lost to prevent this attack.
Teenage sweethearts Chloe Rutherford and Liam Curry also lost their lives.
Forgiveness will never be an option for such evil intentions, and those that played any part in the murder of our children will never ever get forgiveness. From top to bottom, MI5 to the associates of the attacker, we will always believe that you all played a part in the murder of our children. Nothing can bring Liam and Chloe back, nothing. But we won't let them be forgotten.
This may be the final chapter of this inquiry, but the effects of the attack are far-reaching, and today's details won't heal the scars of this indelible atrocity. Andy Bonner, ITV News, Manchester.
Well, joining us now is Figan Murray. Her son Martin was killed in the Arena attack. So Figan, what do you make of today's report?
Yeah, it's exactly what I expected happened, just like with volume 1 and 2. More mistakes and failings were unearthed. That's exactly what I expected, really.
What do you make of the many missed opportunities?
Well, they are what they are. You know, we can't turn the clock back, unfortunately. There's been right across all volumes, loads of errors and mistakes. But, you know, the whole purpose of the inquiry was to unearth all these failings. And we now need to look forward and make sure that some of these failings, or ideally all of them, are rectified, so that nothing like this ever happens again.
Were you surprised by MI5's apology? We don't often hear anything from them, do we?
I was touched by it. I was really pleased that we got an apology, and I personally, just speaking for myself, I accept the apology. There have been other factions early on in other volumes where people were defensive rather than saying, we hold our hands up, we've made mistakes. So that's a good, positive step.
And they have to live with making those mistakes.
Totally. Everybody who has failed, everybody who's made a mistake knows they failed and made mistakes. And you know what? They have to look every morning in the mirror and live with that. And that's tough.
So much of this report was done in secret, troubling for families. Do you have trust in MI5 that they will implement, rectify what they need to do, they will make the necessary changes?
Well, the chairman of the inquiry, Sir John Saunders, has been incredibly thorough right across the board, and he left absolutely no stone unturned. And I am sure that behind closed doors, to the stuff we weren't privy of, he will have applied the same scrutiny, and therefore I absolutely trust that that process will have happened, and that MI5 hopefully will rectify all the errors and mistakes and failings.
And in the meantime, you've done so much to try to make venues safer. Is that going to be some comfort to you going forward?
Well, there's still work to be done with Martin's Law, but, you know, I did have a meeting with Suella Braverman and Tom Tugendhat in December, and 3 days later I had a telephone conversation with Rishi Sunak. So got the green light for it, but there's still some processes to go through. But I'm very confident that sometime in the next 12 months, hopefully, the legislation will be in, and then people will be safer.
Well done for all of that work that you've been doing, Figen, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a long and determined campaign by Figen to improve security at venues, but crucially, as she says, it is the role of MI5 to stop the danger ever reaching those venues.
Yeah, so just how much did they know about Salman Abedi before this attack? Our political correspondent Leisha McNally reports.
It's the question that hangs over the arena atrocity and haunts those left living with their loss. Could this terror attack have ever been prevented? And was this the moment that might have made all the difference? 18th of May 2017, 4 days before the bombing, a radical extremist arrives at Manchester Airport, flown straight from a war zone, and sets off on a murderous mission.
It might have been as simple as a challenge. Look, lad, we know what you're up to. Pack it in.
Andrea Bradbury is a retired police and counter-terrorism officer from Lancashire. She was injured in the Manchester Arena attack, which she says was the result of a perfect storm of failures, including from the security services.
Phone calls, vast amounts of information on devices, family members. How much of a picture do you need?
This is the picture MI5 had of the man who became the bomber. Salman Abedi had been flagged to security services as early as 2010. As the civil war in Libya intensified and support for ISIS grew, members of South Manchester's Libyan community came under increased investigation by MI5, and Salman Abedi was named a live subject of interest. First for 4 months in 2014, and again for just 1 day in 2015.
The Islamist threat was really quite high at that time, roughly about 3,500 individuals that they're looking at who are deemed as a risk and subjects of interest. The workload is monitoring. It's then doing an assessment of how much resources should be put into that individual. Are you looking at a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week surveillance? Now, you can imagine the staffing level that's required for that, but you can't put all of them under that type of surveillance. And if it's looking as though, well, it's actually not that dangerous, then they will go down the pecking order. And I think that's what happened with Salman Abedi.
So, from 2015 onwards, Salman Abedi became one of around 20,000 former subjects of interest, but was a stronger picture building, and should MI5 have spotted it. Twice Abedi was known to have visited a convicted terrorist in prison. He'd made multiple trips to Libya, and in early 2017, he and his brother Hashem began buying the chemicals needed to build a bomb. So why wasn't Salman Abedi put back on MI5's watch list? 2 anonymous witnesses told the inquiry about the years and months leading up to the bombing. One said he'd flagged that he and his colleagues were struggling to cope with a significant increase in workload and was worried something could potentially get through. Another, known as Witness J, said, "We had fragments of what we know now. We had a blurred picture, and we did not conclude we had intelligence related to attack planning." And at the heart of this spider web of work were 2 pieces of intelligence that came to MI5 in the months before the attack. They acknowledged they failed to appreciate the significance at the time.
Alarm bells should have rung more. They didn't see it too much as a threat, and they should have done.
And they didn't act quickly enough. By May the 1st, 2017, MI5 had decided to reassess Abedi's threat to national security. But the meeting was fixed for the 31st of May. Tragically, 9 days too late. In that gap, Salman Abedi returned from Libya to Manchester, possibly carrying the switch for his bomb. He was not stopped at border control. He was not followed to where his terrorist material had been stashed.
If the intelligence had been exchanged more effectively on his arrival at Manchester Airport, there would have been what we call a Schedule 7 port stop.
Do you think that would have made the difference?
Potentially, yes, because you have to answer all the questions. You have to hand over any devices you've got so they can be examined, and it can potentially then lead to an arrest.
Though exactly what MI5 knew and how they knew it, we'll likely never know, because this part of the inquiry was heard behind closed doors in the interests of national security. The chair promised to find the answers, even if he had to find them in secret. And now the Arena families have to live with that knowledge and the questions of what might have been. Leisha McNally, ITV News.
Well, joining us now is Peter Williams, who is an intelligence expert from John Moores University. Peter, quite remarkable to hear this apology from MI5.
Yes, very much so, unprecedented. What you've got to viewers need to remember, we're talking about a service here that only was officially recognised in 1989. So traditionally, it's kept its secret. And of course, that has entailed, it's made traditionally no comment. Over the last few years, every autumn, the director tends to make a press interview or statement, what they refer to as an annual assessment. Apart from that, there's never publicly any comment. The last time there was any recognition of a public comment was the murder of the Conservative MP David Amos, and that was the last time, and that was merely a sort of expression of sympathy from the staff at but apart from that, never known anything like this at all.
So with all of that in mind, and given that so much of this part of the inquiry was held in secret, do you think we'll ever get to know what went on in the security services?
Well, I suspect the answer to that is going to be no. I mean, I think Sir John Saunders indicated that today, didn't he, in his view that the actual operational practice. But what we do know is that post of what happened here in Manchester and the London bombings, if viewers remember that March of 2017, both counter-terrorism policing and MI5 initiated what they've referred to as an operational improvement review. That reported with 104 recommendations. We know now from the director's last public statement, which was 16th of November 2022, just a few months ago, they've initiated or they've implemented 102 of those recommendations, and he makes reference to that in the statement today. Now, that was externally validated by David Anderson, QC, so viewers can go online and view Anderson's report. That may give us some indication of what's happened here.
Just briefly though, I mean, some of this is still so unresolved, isn't it, really? We haven't seen some people even brought to the inquiry to answer questions.
Absolutely, it's the very nature of intelligence work that it's like that. People only can make decisions on partial information.
And we have to put our trust in them. Peter, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really
Pleasure.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, what changed? What happened to shape Salman Abedi's beliefs?
Yeah, and how did a seemingly unremarkable teenager born in South Manchester go on to murder 22 people and injure hundreds more? Tim Scott has this report.
He had been described as a normal young man who enjoyed playing football and liked to party. So what changed for Salman Abedi? What motivated him to commit the atrocity at Manchester Arena, which killed 22 innocent people?
We have to understand his perhaps troubled upbringing, perhaps the influence of the jihadi support that he may have seen in his own family, his own lack of prospects, and how that may have been then played upon by the undoubted ISIS propaganda that was being pumped out by people he will have come across.
The Libyan civil war appears to be a crucial factor in Salman Abedi's radicalisation. Abedi's parents fled the country as dissidents under the regime of Colonel Gaddafi. Abedi's father, Ramadan, was a member of the anti-Gaddafi Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, described in 2006 as a threat to global safety and allies of Al-Qaeda. And in 2011, he took his sons back to Libya to fight in the struggle against Gaddafi. Pictures from the time show Salman and his brothers with weapons and dressed in military uniform.
Abedi, for example, came back and he was radicalised by that brutal uprising, and he came back to this country, looked at what was happening in Syria and was certainly brainwashed into thinking that he was doing some sort of holy act.
As the child of an immigrant family, was Abeidi struggling to fit in? Was there a conflict between living in a liberal democracy yet being born into a strict Islamist family?
Comfortably British and confidently Muslim. You know, if he'd have got to that level of balancing his cultural identity, his religious identity, and him being a Mancunian, I think we would never have had that sad atrocity.
We also know that Salman Abeidi was in contact with Islamic hardliners in South Manchester. Abdal Rauf Abdallah was jailed for helping people join ISIS. Salman Abeidi visited him in prison in the months before the bombing. Was Abeidi groomed towards radicalisation by people like this?
The grooming happens different ways. One, it could be online, so whereby they start up a WhatsApp group or a Facebook group at the time. And then after a couple of months, they then say, look, our people are suffering in Syria. What are you doing here? You're being sinful. So if you're not knowledgeable or understanding of your faith, and then they'll make you feel guilt, and they said the only way you could relieve your sins is to fly out.
At Didsbury Mosque, Salman Abeidi's father would lead prayers and the whole family would attend. A former imam there told the inquiry he fell foul of Salman Abeidi after preaching against ISIS terrorism.
I think he was with Hashim, and he gave me a hateful look. So he looked at me with hate. He showed me that he didn't like me.
The mosque accused Mr Al Saiti of lying and insist radicalism has no place there. We don't have Salman Abeidi's computer records, nor do we have his phone records, which may have shown who he was speaking to in the lead up to the bombing. But it seems clear that his strict Islamist upbringing, fighting in Libya with his father and his brothers, his identity crisis and his associations with ISIS sympathisers here in South Manchester all conspired to put him onto that deadly path, a path that was to lead to him building the bomb which claimed 22 innocent lives.
Well, with us now is Nicola Brooke from the law firm Brodie Jackson Cantor. Nicola, good to see you. This has all been deeply troubling for the families. What next for them?
Well, the families have long believed that Salman Abeidi should never have been able to get into the arena with his bomb, given everything that was known to the security services about him. So their aim is to achieve real change. So they'll be keeping a keen eye on progress against the recommendations that have been made public, especially the convicted terrorists who are in prison and how they are treated in terms of visitors. But they're also very keen to find out more about these secret recommendations.
It's hard to have trust in organisations when they haven't been upfront and honest from the outset.
Absolutely, and MI5 is an organisation that is obsessed with secrecy. The fact that these recommendations are, MI5 are being consulted on them and they are not yet settled, that's quite concerning. That suggests to me that they are not accepting the recommendations that are being suggested by the chair, and that reeks of an organisation that is trying to shy away from scrutiny, and that's not a healthy organisation that's looking to improve.
You were involved with the Hillsborough inquiry and the subsequent law on the duty of candour. Do you believe that we've seen that in this inquiry?
Absolutely not. The chair in his report points to the evidence of witness J and characterises his evidence to this inquiry as inaccurate, and that's about these two pieces of intelligence that are still being kept secret from the families. And don't forget, these families have signed confidentiality undertakings to not share anything and make it public. They, above all, are entitled to know what the security services knew about Salman Abeidi, and they should be trusted to keep that confidential. It's in their interest as well as everybody else's.
So, how are they tonight?
They're upset. They're upset and they're frustrated. Upset to see this litany of failures spelled out and for it to be finally acknowledged that the attack might have been prevented.
So we haven't heard the last of this, have we?
These families are looking for accountability and they're not going anywhere.
Nicola, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the inquiry might be over, but the Glade of Light here will stand as a permanent memorial to those who had their lives taken from them that terrible, terrible night.
Yeah, throughout today, People have been stopping here and leaving new flowers, tulips, daffodils, roses, and this memorial will ensure that those people who died and their families and friends will always remain at the heart of this city. The inquiry began with those 22 names being read out. Tonight, for the final chapter of that inquiry, it's how we end. Good night.
John Atkinson, Courtney Boyle, Kelly Brewster, Georgina Callender, Olivia Campbell Hardy, Liam Curry, Wendy Fowle, Martin Hett, Megan Hurley, Alison Howe, Nell Jones, Michelle Kiss, Angelica Kliss, Marcin Kliss, Sorrel Lechkowski, Lisa Lees, Aileen MacLeod, Elaine McIver, Safi Rose Roussos, Chloe Rutherford, Philip Tron, and Jane Tweddle.